Hello and welcome everyone. So today we will create a use throttle hook. So in this video we'll be learning about what is throttling and we'll create our own React custom hook which is use throttle, and we will use that hook to implement a throttling logic wherein you type in some input and you see the output in a series of intervals or in a particular interval of time. So let's first look at a simple image of what throttling looks like. So suppose we have an event that occurs at point 1 and point 2, point 3, point 4, and point 5. And the throttling time and the delay that we want is represented by these lines, these dotted lines. So what these delays are actually. So assume that an event is happening continuously, like suppose you're scrolling down the page, and since scroll is an event, so when you scroll down the page, hundreds of events get fired, hundreds of events, scroll down events gets fired. So even if you scroll down by 1 pixel, the event is fired, right? So like when you scroll down the entire page, hundreds of events, thousands of events are fired. So what we really want is, we don't want to actually perform an action on all those thousands of events. What we want is, we want to like perform a particular action on, say, uh, hundreds of events clubbed together once. Like if if 100 of events have passed, then I want to perform one action. Now if hundreds of other events have passed, I want to perform another action. Or let's say when you're scrolling down the page, you only want that I want to perform an action once, when once 500 milliseconds of event firing is done, right? Or when once 100 milliseconds of event firing is done. Like when you're scrolling down the page, when 100 milliseconds have passed, I want to perform an action on whatever target pixel that I am. Now when you keep on scrolling down the page, when you keep on scrolling down the page, you want that after every 100 milliseconds of the events getting fired, I want to perform only one action, right? So let's say this dotted line represents our 100 millisecond duration. So what this actually tells us is, when you perform the very first event, our throttle gets fired. Now, if another event is performed before a 100 milliseconds delay, before a 100 milliseconds interval, if you perform another event, then that gets then that event does not get triggered at that time. It will trigger only after the interval has completed. When only after the interval is completed, that event will only trigger at that time, because throttling is what you can throttling is basically performing only one event inside an interval. So in this interval I perform only this event, in this interval I perform only this event, right? Or you can say, in this interval I perform only this event. Like you can take an exception of first event, like you always fire the first event. After that, in this interval I perform this event, in this interval I perform this event, in this interval I perform this event. So inside an interval only one event will be performed. So that is what throttling is. So if an event is triggered before the interval completes, then that will get shift to when the interval is just completed. So also, like, let's look at three. Like, okay, so one interval has passed. Now I fired two events inside this interval. Now if I fire two events inside this interval, then the first event will get cancelled and the second event will get carry forward to when the interval is completed. So that means, when you are performing throttling, and you perform multiple events inside an interval, then that means only the last event that is performed inside the interval will get carry forward and get called. All the other events inside the interval will be lost. Only the last event which is performed inside the interval will get carry forward and get triggered, right? So like this is a strategy that is used in various web applications. Like, you want to listen for scroll down events in a page and then perform some operations, or like you want to limit the number of clicks on a button. Like if clicking on a button performs some kind of operation, then you want to put a rate limit on that, so that every click does not perform operation. Like, every 500 milliseconds single click performs operation, that way. So let's try to code this up. So first I'll create an input. I'll create a val set val and use state. So this is a replit that I created, and its initial value will be this. I will create a use effect. Use effect. This will basically call my value, throttled value, uh, throttled value, and this will print my value here. So this is just for the at the later stage. You can just ignore it for now. Return will return a div, and here we will create an input, and its placeholder will be uh, type value, and on change we will do handle change. I'll create a handle change function here. Handle change function will take e, and I'll do set value as e dot target dot value. Right. So let's save this up and let's run this. It's running. Wait. Okay, we got an error. Handle change is not defined. Is the spelling wrong? Yeah, the spelling is wrong. Save it. We have an input and we can type in here and we are getting the output here. Now as you can see, I'm getting the throttle value as every letter data type, every letter data type. But now at the end of the hook that I'll just create, what I want is I get the value after every 500 milliseconds of my entering the event. Like say I first value will always get triggered. Now let's say I keep on typing test, but after 500 milliseconds my after 500 milliseconds the value is test. So like first this will get print and then this will get print, all the other values will be lost. So like inside the interval, if this is the last, if this is the last value, if this was the last event inside my interval, then only this will get triggered, else everything will be lost. So what I'll do is I'll create a hook, throttled val, and I'll import it from useThrottle, and I'll just pass in here a val. Like I want to throttle on my this value. I want to throttle on my this value. This is what I want. I will now create this hook. I'll save this. I'll go to this. Let me remove this everything and write it from scratch. So what I'll do is I'll export function, and I'll call this use throttle, and params will be value and interval. I'll say here interval. I'll give it a generic type of t, and my value will be of type t, and I'll return a value of type t. Here type t will be string in this case, so if you just want to replace it with string, that's also fine. I'll create a state here which says throttled val, and set throttled val, and I'll initialize it with use state that also takes in generic parameter, and this will take an initial value of value, and at the end I'll return the throttled value. Now what I want is I will write my logic inside use effect, and this will run either when my value changes or delay changes. Now what I want to do is I'll first put an if condition and check. Also I'll create a new variable here that says last executed, and I'll create a use ref for this, and I'll give it a value of -1. Let me import these as well. Let me import these. Import use ref use state from React. Right. Now I'll check if my date.now is greater than equal to my last executed dot current plus interval. Now if this condition is true, what does this condition mean? This condition means that the event that is fired right now, the event that is fired currently at date dot now, is the event that is getting fired greater than equal to the last executed event plus the interval. This means that has my interval duration passed when the last event was fired. If my interval duration was passed when my last event was fired, like if we take this example, this basically means that uh, if like if my event is fired if my event is fired at this position, if my event is fired at this position, that means if my event is fired at this position and is this if this is greater than equal to the interval and the last event that was fired, then I just set the updated value, set throttle value as value, set throttle value as value, and I'll update my last execute dot current value as date dot now. Now, if this isn't the case, that means if this isn't the case, then that means like somehow here, like our else condition lies here, either 3 or on 4. So what we will do is we will create a timer ID, use set timeout, and I'll inside the set timeout, I'll set the set throttle value to value, and I'll change my last execute dot current to date dot now, and I'll return a cleanup function from here that will also, I'll call this set timeout after delay is done and interval is done, and I'll clear the set timeout here as a cleanup function timer ID. I'll save this now. useThrottle is not defined. I'll import this. I'll save this. I will clear the console, and I still got an error. Use effect is not defined. I have to import it here. Clear, refresh. Still another error. Delay is not defined. Where am I using delay here? Uh, okay, here. I'll change it with interval. I'll save this now. I will refresh it again. Now it's working. I'll type in values. We can still see that the values are not getting throttled. So what I will do here is set throttled value, use state value. I will remove this as empty string, and now I'll clear this, and we can still see that every value is fired. What we are doing here is, and we need to call, yeah, we are calling this every time throttle gets fired. Handle change is called getting called, and then use throttle does is use state, it initializes with use state date dot now, and check with whether our last event fired plus interval is greater than equal to the current time. If it is, we set the throttle value, else we create a timer ID and we return the cleanup function, and then at the end we return the throttle value. I'll just call this when my value changes. And let me clear this up, and I can still, okay, I need to provide a delay here. So what I'll do is I'll create a default interval of 500, and I'll save this. I'll refresh this, and let's see what happens now. Interval is 500. but I am still getting called as this. Let me assign it a value of 500. Let me assign it a value. I'll clear this. I'll refresh this. Hmm. Okay. So there something is wrong. It is getting called again and again. Let me remove this as well and refresh this. Hmm. Okay. Uh, okay. So there were a couple of mistakes that I was doing. So my first mistake was I need to print my throttled value here instead of value because that is the output that I want to print. And also I want to rerun this when my throttled value gets changed. I want to rerun this when my throttle value gets changed because that makes sense. Since my throttle value is changing, I need to show the updated value here. So that makes sense because I have to re-render this to see the updated value. I'll run save now. I'll refresh this once again and let me type in some values. So as you can see, it does not print every character, it just prints the values after the interval gets passed. So my first value prints as is, and the next value only gets printed when my interval has passed, when my interval of 500 milliseconds has passed, and then the next value as well gets printed when the interval has passed. So this is a basic implementation of throttling. Now to go over this if else logic once again, what this basically does is if it first it checks whether my interval has passed. If my interval has passed, it just basically sets a updated value and updates the last execution count. Why last execution count is important? Because we want to call only we want to trigger the throttle only once when the interval has passed between the last executed and the current time. Else, what we'll do is we'll create a set timeout to call when the interval has passed and we'll return a clear timeout. What this will do is it will clean up the previous calls. So like if my 3 and 4 events are fired, what clear timeout will do is it will clean up the third interval, clean up the third timer, clean up the third set timeout and only call the fourth one. So this was all for today and I'll see you in next one.